I traded away my future for one breathtaking moment, pouring everything into a sleek, perfect machine only to watch in stunned silence as she and my boss vanished into the night, the roar of the engine echoing my own disbelief and heartbreak. The pungent smell of burnt rubber still lingers in my memory, as vivid as the roar of the Lamborghini's engine, a beast awakening. Her eyes, electric with excitement, mirrored the insanity pulsing through my veins. Every sacrifice, every late night spent conquering the digital gold rush, I was gambling away for her, believing her words when she said I hung the moon. My heart pounded ruthlessly, driven by adrenaline that clouded logic. And I handed over the keys, envisioning her happiness, imagining myself the hero of her dreams. But as she turned and flashed that smile, the very one that had me in knots, and then let her gaze rest on him, my boss, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Everything was on the edge of unraveling, and I stood frozen, a spectator at the precipice of my own carefully constructed world. The dealership was a glittering palace of sharp lights and polished glass. As we stepped inside, the scent of new leather and waxed pristine surfaces flooded my senses, filling me with a ridiculous sense of possibility. Caroline was ahead of me, her heels tapping decisively on the tiled floor. She looked back, over her shoulder, eyes sparkling with unfiltered excitement. It was infectious, seeing her like that, eyes wide and alive with something I hadn't seen in too long. Under the sleek showroom lights, every detail of the cars glistened as though each surface was made of pure promise. There it was, the Lamborghini. A beast in metallic glory, a vision grounded in reality, yet unbelievable. Caroline paused in front of it, the dealership papers crinkling in her tightening grip, like a tangible piece of our improbable dream. She placed a tentative hand on the door handle, a moment of both reverence and disbelief. "We're really doing this, huh?" Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, tinged with a giddy buoyancy that bubbled to the surface. "Yeah," I breathed out, a mixture of pride and hope swelling in my chest. It was the kind of moment you didn't want to break, sacred and fragile, like spun sugar. She slid into the seat, and I watched as she adjusted it to conform perfectly to her petite frame, her fingers tracing the leather, becoming lost in the luxury. I couldn't help but smile, loving how the car already seemed to belong to her, fitting around her with an easy sort of inevitability. From the corner of my eye, I noticed my boss watching, a familiar predatory smirk twisted across his face. He hovered just a few steps behind, and I could feel the weight of his presence pressing forward, unstintingly loomed like a shadow in daylight. He was the kind of man who basked in his own gravity, his eyes calculating every scenario. He clapped a hand around my shoulder, a gesture meant to be friendly, but his grip was just a touch too firm. "Quite a car," he said, his voice dripping with polished charisma. "You thinking about driving out of here with it today?" I nodded, trying to match his easy confidence. "Yeah, it's more for Caroline, though." I gestured toward her, forcing a light laugh past the knot in my throat. "She's been dreaming of this." Caroline was adjusting the mirrors, her focus completely immersed in her new world. As she straightened, the boss's gaze lingered, just a second too long, drawn to her every movement, the glint of interest unmistakable, dancing in his stare like a hawk eyeing a prey. I pretended not to notice, pretending to catalog courage where my instincts whispered unease. Inside the car, Caroline caught my eye, her smile wide and real, and for that moment, I allowed myself to bask in the hope we had somehow conjured from nothing. So much seemed possible, even as the unease gripped the edges of my mind and refused to let go. Caroline's laughter floated on the autumn breeze, soft like the leaves that rustled around us. The sound, once a balm to my fraying nerves, now felt oddly out of place against the growl of the engine she revved. "Can you believe it?" she grinned, eyes twinkling in the sunlight, her hand elegantly twisting the steering wheel. I could sense my boss hovering at her side, his attention supposedly on the polished curves of the car. He ran a finger along the hood, a gesture that seemed too intimate, too deliberate. "Impressive," he murmured, his voice slick with insincerity, echoing the threat I was beginning to imagine it bore. I clenched my fists slightly, as if feeling the weight of the unspoken words. "Mind if I check under the hood?" he asked smoothly, pivoting towards me with a sharpness that sent a jolt through my chest. Caroline glanced at me briefly before nodding, relishing the spotlight. His voice dripped like honeyed poison, all too conveniently close, and I swallowed hard, feigning indifference as my insides twisted. You wouldn't mind. Yeah, he drawled, casting a quick glance over his shoulder as if to ensure no spectators. How could something as mundane as a peep under the hood make me so acutely aware of the growing chasm between us? As I forced myself to nod, my vision narrowed, emotions pooling dangerously beneath an outward calm. He popped the hood, fingers deft and possessive, his interest leaching from the car to Caroline. Underneath it all, I recognized the game, his incongruously secretive manner and assault on my steadily eroding comfort. An uneasy silence thickened between the engine's soft rumble and our labored breathing. The air, once crisp and exhilarating, now stuck in my throat as my eyes darted between Caroline and him. She was chatting animatedly about horsepower and fuel efficiency, her animated tones contrasting ruthlessly with the discord gnawing at me. With each word exchanged, their familiarity became undeniable, punctuated by shared looks that excluded me entirely. The longer I watched, the more the dots connected themselves in dissonant clarity, a sudden congruence in the equations of which I'd been, reluctantly, a part. The vivid hues of the setting sun spilled out over the horizon, painting their silhouettes bold and unapologetic. A pang of something I'd refused to name sliced through my chest. Just a shadow of its former self, that casual trust I'd worn like armor started slipping away. My heartbeat quickened, and with it, a creeping dread. It was the kind that lodged itself deep into the bones, refusing release. As I listened to Caroline's laughter taper off beneath his lowered tone, I wondered if the wrenching sensation would ever leave or only widen like a fissure, an unending ripple in what I'd thought was calm water. Her laughter, golden and carefree, filled the air around us, threading through the hum of the engine. I stood beside the car, hands awkwardly tucked into my pockets, trying to mask the tickle of discomfort unraveling inside of me. Caroline, perched in the driver's seat, revved the engine, an act both triumphant and reckless, echoing her exhilaration. She radiated joy, a beacon of misplaced triumph under the fluorescent garage lights. I should have been sharing in her triumph, celebrating this moment we'd worked so hard to achieve. Instead, a sliver of doubt wormed its way into my thoughts, darkening the edges of my elation. Her laughter pierced through my chest, a melody discordant against the backdrop of my spiraling thoughts. It felt as though I was being edged out of a picture I was part of, replaced by something unseen, yet undeniably felt. Caroline's eyes flicked sideways, catching my boss's gaze across the pavement. There, between them, lay a glance teeming with unspoken connection, an invisible thread binding them in some secret, intimate understanding. I watched, feeling like an outsider in a moment that should have been mine, like I was witnessing a language meant for them alone, leaving me fumbling for a key to decipher it. I forced a smile, hoping it reached my eyes, praying it masked the churn in my gut. You really got the hang of it, huh? I managed to say, each word feeling like a betrayal of the roiling insecurity clawing its way through my thoughts. Caroline's laugh, bright and effervescent, seemed almost deliberate now, like she knew its effect, yet couldn't, or wouldn't, temper it. My boss, leaning casually against the wall, smirked, his gaze not meeting mine, fixed solely on her. Yeah, she's been a fast learner, he said, words slipping out with a familiarity that felt wrong. Too easy, too comfortable for comfort. Each syllable turned, twisted, leaving invisible barbs that pricked at my skin, little reminders of moments I wasn't meant to question but couldn't ignore. I wanted to dismiss it, to shove the burgeoning suspicion back into the recesses of unfounded paranoia. But I couldn't shake the scene before me. The shared laughter, the engine's roar, and that goddamn glance, persistent and unerasable. It was like perfectly choreographed theater, leaving me awkwardly stranded as an accidental walk-on. Let me just take a quick spin, Caroline suggested, her words wrapped in silk, brushing past me toward him, not me. My stomach twisted, grappling with the notion that this camaraderie between them signaled a breach I hadn't been ready to face. Still, I nodded, the motion automatic, unable to refuse without cause, without fracturing my own constructed belief in normalcy even further. She pulled away, tires screeching lightly over concrete, leaving behind a gust that ruffled my carefully constructed facade. I stood watching her disappear, the car a silver bullet slicing through night air, tasting the bitter tang of realization. In her absence, silence enveloped us, heavy with questions and unanswered truths I wasn't ready to ask. Caroline's laughter echoed against the walls of the garage, bouncing into a twisted symphony of mockery that hit me straight in the gut. Her joy seemed to ring louder than the engine she revved impatiently, a counterpoint to the dread curling in my stomach. I stood there, paralyzed, watching through the smeared glass of the office window as my boss leaned casually against the doorframe, his eyes locked onto Caroline. Their silent exchange was a language I didn't understand, but the message was clear. I did not belong in this story. Her hand gripping the wheel, his approving nod. It was like watching a scene from a nightmare unfold in slow motion. The absurdity of it all, the way they seemed to carve a space without me in it, left me feeling like a ghost, unseen and irrelevant. The engine roared to life again, a beast awakened, and I felt its rumble under my feet, reverberating up through the concrete floor and into my bones. I tried to think of something to say, anything that might puncture their bubble of conspiratorial understanding, but my words dissolved before they could reach my lips. My mouth went dry as cotton, my pulse thudding an empty rhythm in my ears. Caroline wore my favorite hoodie, the one she would steal on rainy nights, claiming it was the only thing that could keep her warm. The thought drifted through me like a bitter wind. Her wear of it now felt like a violation, as though she'd wrapped herself in the fragments of my trust just to throw them back twisted and stained. My boss turned to me then, and his gaze skimmed past like I was a piece of the scenery, unworthy of acknowledgement. That look, that dismissal, stung sharper than any words could have. His indifference was a dagger, twisting deeper with each tick of the clock. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my voice was shackled by disbelief and growing fury. Instead, I stood there, shackled by invisibility, feeling the edges of my reality crumbling under the weight of betrayal. In that charged silence, an understanding seeped in, icy and merciless. I was witnessing my own undoing. Caroline caught my eye briefly in the rearview mirror, her expression unreadable, a specter of guilt or merely indifference. I couldn't tell. The next moment, she pulled out of the garage, the tires screeching in protest against the concrete. My heart plummeted with each revolution, accelerating towards something far worse than heartache. The garage light flickered above, leaving shadows shifting on the floor, mirroring the chaos within me. As the taillights faded into the distance, the enormity of my isolation set in. I was an interloper in my own world, left to grapple with the hollowed space they left behind. A world reshaped by a pact I never saw coming, forged in silent whispers and sidelong glances. The world around me held its breath, every sound muted except for the nauseating thump of my own pulse. Caroline's hands, those familiar hands I had once seen as my salvation, now gripped the steering wheel with an unsettling ease, like this was normal, like she had always been meant to take that wheel. The engine's deep growl purred through the tension, feeding an undercurrent I couldn't quite name, invisible, yet visceral, tethering us in some unholy triangle. I took a step forward, heart heavy and feet reluctant. The sidewalk seemed to stretch underfoot, an endless chasm of cracking concrete leading to the cruel theater unfolding in the driveway. Her eyes flickered to mine for a brief, gut-wrenching moment. Recognition, maybe, or simply contempt cloaked in familiarity. Then her gaze shifted past me, as though I were nothing more than a ghostly apparition unwanted in the waking world. My boss, no, the man who had been my boss, sidled up beside her, his silhouette cutting a dark line against the waning light. He didn't look back. Not once. His hand reached out, steady and sure, resting atop hers. Their fingers intertwined, ignorant of the storm ripping my insides apart. My chest tightened, clenching as if it could crush the feeling into oblivion. But the betrayal was bigger than bones or muscle. I should have felt anger, a dam of fury waiting to be unleashed. Instead, there was only a terrifying clarity, a stark acceptance settling in my very marrow. It washed over me like ice, numbing, yet bringing everything into sharp, cruel focus. This was it, The moment before the finality, the silence preceding the crash. I stood there, watching my investment, my dreams, and my heart driving away, co-piloted by the man who signed my checks. As the car lurched forward, tires flirting with the gravel beneath, I couldn't move, trapped in a conversational standstill with the past and this blistering present. The air tasted bitter, each breath a blade cutting deeper than I thought possible. Shadows stretched longer against the ground, elongating into grotesque versions of what we had been, snaking away with them into that plush leather interior. With each passing second, the car grew smaller, a shrinking star pulling its gravity and warmth farther away. My hands hung limp at my sides, shells of themselves, unable to reach out, unable to grasp what had already been lost. The road, familiar and unforgiving, carried them forward until they were little more than pinpricks fading into dusk. I turned away, the oppressive quiet returning, clutching at the remnants of my dignity. There was just me now, standing in the chill of betrayal's shadow, an emptiness echoing louder than words could ever convey. My heart, a solitary drummer in the silence, kept marching me forward, step by unforgiving step, into whatever awaited beyond this final resignation. The air stung cold in their absence, reality smacking my ego with brutal certainty. I stood alone in the dealership's parking lot, a once bustling hub now reduced to a haunting wilderness. Engines that roared with promise and unending chatter, scattered by a sudden gust of fate, leaving me enveloped in the stark silence of my own decisions. The horizon swallowed them whole, that car, with all its allure, and the woman who sat behind the wheel. She turned her back on me with a practiced ease that left a sting sharper than any fading exhaust. I could hear the high-pitched whine of car tires on asphalt, an eternal loop playing the moment she decided I wasn't enough anymore. I ran my fingers through my hair, every move deliberate, as if orchestrating a futile attempt to smooth the disheveled chaos within me. The lines of dusty cars around me blurred into ghostly figures, shadowy judges in this impromptu courtroom of regret. They saw through every pretense I'd carefully constructed. The truth of her betrayal circled like vultures, and the outspread wings whispered the question I couldn't ignore. Why didn't I see it coming? I glanced around, hoping for an anchor, a tether to some semblance of normalcy. But there was nothing, no comforting chorus of a missing phone, no rhythmic clatter of keyboards in the office. Just the vast, echoing emptiness encroaching on the edges of my thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of her eyes, those eyes that once held warmth, now cold with secrets kept, feelings undeclared. I thought I knew her, that part of her that was mine. Yet, her gaze was the last to betray me, an unapologetic reminder of everything I miscalculated. Each step away from the lot felt like more than just a step. It was an acceptance, a reluctant nod to the unraveling tapestry of our shared memories. The spool of what I believed was us rolled out on hard concrete, leaving me to pick up only the tatters. My car sat where I'd left it, an accomplice in ignorance. The keys bit into my palm, their presence grounding but barely enough to halt the disarray. I pocketed them, a motion practiced countless times, yet never so weighted with loss. The enormity of my solitude crystallized, no longer a backdrop, but the entire stage on which I stood. Choices. Oh, the choices. They weren't a grand display here. They were intricate brushstrokes turned messy lines. And amidst this bleak painting, her absence drew the clearest line yet. Depression, they say, slows everything to a creeping crawl, a syrupy quagmire that constrains your limbs, your thoughts. But in this moment, the melancholy was swift and brutal, a whip snapping my heart in two, neatly cleaving the dream from my reality. With a final glance at the empty space she left, I turned away, every muscle aching with the need to escape this maze and find my way back to something. If not her, then maybe at least myself. The silence of the room pressed in from all sides, a vacuum where every unmet promise and broken vow floated, mocking me. Her voice, soft and syrupy, had once been my lullaby, but now each syllable she'd ever uttered twisted into something poisonous, echoes that refused to dissipate. Forever, she'd said one warm night, her breath mingling with mine as we lay tangled in dreams. But now, in the cold clarity of hindsight, forever felt like a cruel joke. I stared at the ceiling, tracing patterns in the cracks, each crevice a reminder of the fractures I'd chosen to ignore. Nights rolled back like an old film reel. Her laughter, bright and unanchored, promising adventures, the kinds I'd read in books and dared to believe could become our reality. I imagined us moving through the world as one dynamic force, tackling every dream and defying every expectation. Those phantom dreams now brushed against me, featherlight and taunting, leaving me colder than before. "It'll always be you and me," she whispered in one memory, her fingertips tracing patterns on my skin, patterns that would disappear with the morning light but linger long enough to leave an imprint in my mind, strong and unyielding. Her words seemed like truths back then, woven so seamlessly into the fabric of my belief that I wore them like armor, never imagining they'd be the barbs to pierce through. Yet here I was, sifting through the rubble, searching for any semblance of truth not shrouded in deceit. How had I not seen it? Her smiles never reached her eyes, a subtle detail that was now glaringly obvious in retrospect. Just like those casual toss-asides, conversations about the future that always seemed to circle back to the present, to the now, never truly anchoring in reality. Moments came rushing back, so vivid and visceral that they left me gasping. Watching her stride across a busy street, hair catching the light like a halo. Her glance over her shoulder at me, inviting yet distant. I thought I knew what it meant then. I thought it said, "Follow me." Perhaps, now, it seems more like a silent warning, "Stay where you are." It was cruel. I murmured to myself, how silence magnified the deceit cloaked in her soft-spoken words. Those lies were an undercurrent, steady and strong, sweeping me along until I finally lost my footing. Yet they echoed louder than truth ever had, reverberating harshly across the void she left behind. The walls of my sanctuary felt too narrow now, each echo bouncing back, harsher with each return. I needed escape, air that had never carried her scent, space where her ghosts didn't linger. The realization landed with a dull thud in my chest. It was time to shed this skin. A part of me shivered at the enormity, but another part leaned into the possibility that lay beyond the exits, still just out of reach. The house is painfully quiet, a suffocating stillness pressing against the walls while I sink deeper into the couch. My limbs feel heavy, as if every bone is resisting any notion of movement, begging me to remain still, to stay buried in numb disbelief. My eyes fixate on the ceiling, tracing invisible lines like they might reveal some secret code to reverse the last few hours. It's pointless, and I know it. Hell, I might as well be searching for stars in the middle of the day. Then, suddenly, the vibration. It slices through the silence like a blade, its insistence impossible to ignore. I fumble for my phone, half hoping it's a trick of my mind. But there it is, glowing defiantly with his name. For a second, it feels like the world stops. My breath hitches as dread rushes back, shadowing the brief spark of hope. It's not a call, it's a text. My thumb hovers, but I know I can't avoid the inevitable. So, I tap on the screen. A stupid meme. A stupid, damn meme we used to laugh about together during lunch breaks when everything was easier and uncomplicated. Back when his laughter was genuine and less like the choking mirage it devolved to. Now, the punchline stings, twisted, mocking, a sinister caricature of what once was our inside joke. It was supposed to be funny, and maybe it still is to him, but now it lands like a blow to the gut, proof that trust was just another casualty. But something changes. The hot flare of anger sears through my veins, a stark contrast to the icy numbness ransacking me all day. My heartbeat accelerates, pounding with an intensity that jostles me from my paralysis. Each thud reverberates through my chest, a furious drumbeat that smashes me into the present moment. I blink hard, confusion sharpening into clarity, pain to purpose. Images of the past flood, not to suffocate, but to illuminate. Laughter echoing in our favorite corner cafe, shared plans of futures bright and promising, our quiet evenings embracing uncertainty with whispers. These memories, once anchors, are now kindling. They burn, tearing through the haze. With each passing second, the embers of my heartbreak ignite into a fiery resolve. Determination is my only ally, and I clutch it with desperate hands. The house isn't a trap anymore. It's a place I can transform. It's mine to reclaim, reforge without deceit. My breath steadies, and standing becomes inevitable. I push up from the couch, feeling the blood rush to my legs, urging me onward. The oppressive silence breaks apart, no longer a weapon but a canvas. I stand there, in the middle of the room, tasting salty resolve on my lips. I stare at the vacuous space that once felt like home. For the first time today, my reflection in the window doesn't look broken. That person staring back is someone about to seize control, to rise from ruins. The room was almost dark except for the weak light of my laptop reflecting off financial reports scattered across the table. Shadows loomed large around me, cascading from the pages covered in numbers and failed dreams. It felt like the end of a long day, but also the start of something undefined, as though time distilled when I finally began planning a way out. I sat there, surrounded by silence, determined to make sense of the chaos. My eyes traced over charts and graphs, lines that went sharply upward before plummeting down, just like my life recently had. It was exhausting. My fingers traced an invisible path over the table, feeling the chilled surface, grounding myself against the betrayal and loss that had been hanging around my neck like an albatross. The night engulfed me in its tantalizing stillness, urging me to make a decision. I inhaled deeply, the air dry and crisp like a newly printed banknote, filled with possibility. I needed a plan. A strategy would rescue me from this abyss, lift me from passive observer to active participant in my story. I wasn't sure how long I sat there, staring at the blinking cursor on the screen, daring it to challenge my resolve. I promised myself this was not the end. I whispered aloud, as though saying it would summon those stars I used to hang for her. Stars that were now just within my grasp, mine to aim for once more. Despite the fragility of hope, it was there, peeking through my exhaustion like the dawn through a clouded sky. A fragile smile flickered on my lips. My fingers tapped rhythmically against the keyboard, each keystroke a pulse in the dull domestic soundtrack of crickets singing outside. Words poured out in jagged sentences as I detailed ways to climb back to life. Cut this expense, pursue that opportunity, focus on growth. Each click of a calculated risk sounded like a footstep toward something better. The screen glowed with new possibilities, a silent witness to my determination. If the ceiling had a voice, it would echo my doubts, but brick by brick, I was building a way through them. The room combusted with the energy of transformation. The same papers that taunted me earlier now started to sing a different tune. Ambition birthed from ruin can be a melody both haunting and liberating. That night, my tears dried under a resolute sky. With each new idea, with each plan strategized, the smothering weight on my shoulders lifted just a little. I was shifting, morphing into someone who could reclaim what was lost, and perhaps discover something even more profound. Hope became tangible as the hours ticked by, weaving itself through the fabric of my resolve. Tomorrow was no longer just a day I dreaded. It was a blank page promising change, waiting for me to write what followed. I woke up to sunlight streaming in through the window, the first rays slicing through the gray fog that had settled over my mind for what felt like eons. It was a reminder that life persisted outside of my own unraveling, a world spinning on a rhythm that didn't care for heartbreak or betrayal. Days had flowed one into the next, but now I felt them individually, like distinct notes in a long symphony. It was time to push myself back into the composition of my own life. I stood in front of the mirror and saw remnants of a person I used to know. Eyes a little wiser, shadows hinting at the battles fought inside my head and heart. But also, there was something sharper, clearer, daring almost. I met my own gaze and saw fire glinting underneath the surface. "You can do this," I murmured to my reflection, a mantra I had recently adopted. It was the quiet propulsion I needed to face the day. The world greeted me in tiny, ordinary ways. The sharp tang of coffee mingling with morning air, the soothing weight of a pen in my fingers as I jotted down today's aspirations, the depth of routine anchoring me amidst chaos. It was the grind, tedious, familiar, but now a paragon of opportunity. Each task was a small protest against the narrative I'd almost allowed to drown me. Out on the bustling streets, life pulsed energetically, a chaotic choreography of people and places. I slipped into it, a cog in the grand machinery, but one bound to forge its own destiny now. My determination became a physical sensation, vibrating in my bones as if my very structure had been fortified by grit and persistence I never knew I possessed. The betrayal had felt like a sucker punch, leaving me gasping and disoriented. But now, with each passing day, I realized it was also a spark that ignited something dormant inside of me. In the quiet spaces, in solitude's black and white palette, I'd begun reconstructing myself. I sifted through the ashes of misplaced trust and discovered a version of myself I'd never known. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of who I was becoming. The city, sprawling and indifferent, now echoed with my potential. From the facade of indifference towered a resolve so fierce, even disappointment dared not linger beyond its toll. The small steps I took, finishing assignments, refocusing dreams once tethered to others, each carried the weight of rebirth. In the evening, as the sun bled into twilight hues, I stood on the rooftop, the wind tousling hair freed from inhibition. Beneath the heaven's vast indigo expanse, I felt the ember within flare into brilliance. I understood in that profound quiet. I was ready. Ready to carve a path lit by my dreams alone, unfettered by the shadows I'd left behind. A new chapter beckoned, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt like a space I was eager to fill.